Hello again and welcome back to Illegally Cited. This is Jesse, and yes, I am back again for another iOS accessible game video. This time we are looking at a game called The Salt Keep. I believe it is kind of a choose your adventure type of thing, if I recall correctly. I've been hearing some pretty good things about it here and there online, and I believe I read about it on AppleVis or something like that. So we are just going to dive right in. I have never played it before. I figure if this is a story game, we may as well start from the beginning so people can avoid spoilers. This is supposed to be, again, an iOS accessible game, so it is VoiceOver accessible or an audio game or something like that. Regardless, I'm going to give you a look at the game and encourage you to buy or download the game for yourself to play through it. Let's see what this Salt Keep is all about.
The Salt Keep image. A black and white illustration of the Salt Keep heading level. Continue button. New game. Load game. About button.
Okay, well,
Load,
I guess
new game button.
We're going to go new game because I've never played this before.
New game. Image. The Salt Keep heading level. Continue button. New game button.
What?
The Salt Keep image. A screenshot of a black and white background with white text. T-tutor.
What?
Image. A screenshot of a black and white background with white text. T-tutor. The Salt Keep heading level 3. Continue button. Continue. New game button. New game. Empty slot button. Empty slot button.
Okay, we got to do a little bit of explore by
Empty
touch
slot.
here. Okay, empty slot 1. Here we go. We are unmuted, so either there is no other audio or... Okay, so we got a big old wall of text here. And we got some controls at the top.
Story button. Inventory character button. Settings button.
Okay, let's go settings. Let's see what's in here real quick.
Inventory settings. Light mode. Check mark.
No, we don't want light mode.
Checkbox. Bigger text. Check mark. Bigger text. Check mark. Checkbox. Uncheck.
Yeah, let's do bigger text. Sure.
Bigger line space. Check mark. Bigger line space. Faster transition. Check mark. Faster transitions. Check mark. Checkbox. Uncheck. Double tap.
Sure.
Uncheck. No transitions. Check mark. No transitions. Hotshot mode. Hotshot mode explanation. Button.
Yeah, what is
Hotshot
that?
mode explanation. Check mark. Hotshot mode. Sad sack mode. Hotshot mode. Hotshot mode explanation. Check mark. Checkbox. Sad sack mode. Sad sack mode explanation.
Okay, so one thing I'm noticing is that there likes to be some overlays. And I've seen this in other games and apps as well, where you have this dialogue that is popped up over the settings dialogue or settings screen. And the easiest way it looks like...
When hotshot mode is enabled, all skill checks will automatically pass regardless of the percentage odds provided. Once unlocked, it can be toggled on and off at will to better control your playthrough.
Okay.
Okay, button. Okay.
So again, you can do some flicking, but there are times, again, where you're going to want to use Explore by Touch. I know some people haven't done that, so I just want to reiterate that, you know, if something isn't immediately accessible, give that a shot, because that usually works out pretty well, especially for if it's a voiceover accessible thing here.
Hotshot mode explanation.
Okay, we got hotshot.
Sad sack mode explanation. Button.
Sad sack
mode explanation. When sad sack mode is enabled, all skill checks will automatically fail regardless of the percentage odds provided. Once unlocked. Okay, button.
So basically you can, once you've played the game where like you want to control the story exactly the way you want to see it, just to see how things can happen differently. I get why they would put that in there. Sure.
Return to title menu. Export save. Import save. Button.
Well, that's cool. You can export and import saves. That's kind of a neat idea.
View credits. Button. Stats. Button. Achievements. Button. Achievements.
Okay, we got achievements. And how do we, let's see.
Character. Button. Inventory.
Well, let's just look at our character real quick.
Setting. Character. Level. 1. Games. Exp. 0.
Okay, experience.
Needed. 100.
Okay.
Grit. 10. Smarts. 10. Charm. 10. Luck. 10.
Okay, so grit is probably your health. And then you have, what was it? Grit.
10. Smarts.
Smarts, okay, intelligence, yeah.
10. Charm.
Charm.
10. Luck. 10.
Makes sense.
Health status. Heading level 4. Uninjured. Heading level 4.
Uninjured. Yay, I'm uninjured. Okay.
Inventory.
Straightforward.
Inventory.
Inventory. What do we got here?
Weapon. None. Button. Armor. None. tool, none. Access, none, button.
Okay.
Items, button. Equip, button. Consume, button.
Ah.
Nothing to see.
Okay, so your inventory is going to be down in the middle. Okay. I like the straightforward look of this game. Like it is text, but it's just all, hard black and white. Very good contrast if you want to do this
Story,
low
button.
vision wise.
Story.
All right, let's read our
The dirt
intro.
road, heading level 3. The first thing Doyle saw was the smoke. It billowed thick and black above the rooftops of Cardwike, various smoldering sources out of sight behind the yellow dog walls of the closest houses. A nerve's pit had formed in his stomach, but he knew he couldn't turn back. One hand absent-mindedly pawed at the empty coin pouch on his belt. It had been 4 days since Doyle left Fingate, that was the last populated area before Cardwike, and nearly 2 weeks since he'd spoken to anybody before that. He hadn't sold anything in over a month. The back of his wooden cart was still filled with various designs of Atwater ceramics, each individual piece carefully separated by layers of burlap and hay, all of them jostling in place as they rolled over the uneven dirt road. He eyed one of the empty spaces where a hand-painted jug once sat. Unfortunately, he had broken it during a pitch at the marketplace in Ulan. As they drew closer to the village, Doyle patted his mule, a skinny, gray Molly he called Blondie, despite the ragged, black wisps that made up her mane, and cooed for her to slow. She seemed as anxious as he was at the sight of the village coming into view. Behind it all, looming on a rocky cliff that overlooked the endless sea, was the Salt Keep, the home of Sir Edsel Carden. A few stray spires poked out above the high sandstone walls, purple and white Carden family banners hanging from them. A group of vultures circled overhead. Continue, button.
Okay, vultures, that's always a good sign.
Continue, button. Continue. On the opposite end of the village square, heading level 3, Blondie whimpered as they rolled into the village square, her head swinging from side to side until she came to a stop. Again Doyle patted her, whispering promises in her ear. "We're okay, girl," he said. "We're almost there," before tying her in front of a two-story inn. A sign above the door read the Golden Calf. That was where Mr. Haddon had promised to meet him. As he looked around the square, Doyle was struck by the silence. He didn't hear any of the bustle one would expect from a village in the late afternoon. In fact, he didn't hear anything but the occasional snort and hoof clomp from Blondie, as well as the sound of his own breathing. "Hello?" Doyle shouted. No response. In the center of the square was a stone well, and all around the perimeter were wattle and dog houses, the empty darkness of the windows staring back at Doyle. Interspersed between them were a handful of storefronts, a sign above one read Hanlon's Meats in thick, uneven lettering, while another with a wide open door read Pick and Tack General Store, but even the stores were silent and dark. On the opposite end of the square, the main road sloped uphill toward the Salt Keep. Check on Blondie, button. Look up the main road, button. Go to the Golden Calf, button. Go to the well, button.
Okay, so we got our choices now, with not just a continue button. And I like how they're setting the mood. Yeah, this seems like your typical adventure type of game. We got some character attributes and skill checks and inventory things that we can use to increase or decrease favorable odds. So,
look up the main road, button. Go to the Golden Calf, button. Go to the well, button.
Let's go to the well.
Go to the well.
Maybe somebody left something nearby.
Button. The center of the village square was marked by a stone well with a wooden overhang above the opening. Neat cobblestone extended out in a circle, which Doyle assumed would ordinarily be LTRODDEN by various townspeople bringing sloshing buckets back and forth. There was nobody to be seen, though. Next to the well was a wooden box with a carrying handle, the open top covered with a piece of cloth, except for the iron head of a hammer that poked out from underneath. A toolbox, Doyle thought. Somebody had probably been using it to repair something on the overhang. There was no bucket attached, after all, or even a rope to hold one. Doyle knelt down to look at the box, then noticed a splash of red on the cobblestone. Nervous,
Blood.
he stood up and looked around, but he didn't see anybody. Then he peered over the edge of the well down into the dark below. There was the bucket on the surface of the water, wet rope floating next to it. Some workman's tool was sitting in the bucket, though Doyle couldn't quite make out what it was. Look at the toolbox, button. Go back to the village square, button. Look at the toolbox, look at the toolbox. Blondie didn't. Doyle knelt down in front of the toolbox and pulled the cloth covering aside. First he saw the hammer. It had already been sticking out from beneath the cloth, and next to it was a wooden tray filled with an assortment of iron nails. Some of them looked dusty and bent as if they had been nailed in somewhere else and pulled loose to reuse. The rest of the box was less organized. In a pile Doyle saw a small hand-cranked auger, and a printing knife that looked like it had dulled with use, and an assortment of different chisels still littered with wood shavings. Next to them was an iron hook, about 10 inches long with enough room at the eye for a rope to pass through and be tied. It was probably meant for the well, Doyle thought, but as he glanced up at the wooden overhang, it was not clear to him how to attach it. "I don't know," Doyle said, pulling the hook from the toolbox and holding it up toward Blondie. "Do you think it's okay if I borrow this?" Blondie didn't say anything as he pocketed it. Turn back, button.
Of course. All right, so we'll play a little bit more. We'll see if we can get some
continue button.
Encounters and stuff. Okay, so what do we got here?
Items. Heading level 3. Item acquired. Iron hook.
Okay, we got an iron hook.
Continue button.
Yay!
Continue.
I
Go back to the village
adventured.
square. Button. The well. Heading. Doyle stepped up to the stone well. Eyes on the window.
Okay.
Look at the toolbox. Go back to the village square. Button. Go
Go
back to the village
back.
square. Look up the main road. Check on. In the center of the square was a stone well, and all around it, on
Okay,
the
yep.
opposite end of the square. Look up the main road. Check on Blondie. Go to the golden calf. Button.
Let's go to the
Go to the
calf.
golden calf. Nobody answered. Doyle ran a hand along the bar.
Okay,
Inventory.
let's
The grand
see.
door to the grand door to the golden calf creaked as Doyle nudged it open, glancing back at Blondie as if she might offer some expression of reassurance. She gave him nothing, though. Hesitant, Doyle stepped inside, mud cake brushes shifting beneath his feet as he shut the door behind him. The interior was as silent as the village square. Matching wooden tables populated the first floor, and an unpolished bar spanned the back of the room. A row of brown glass bottles, local brews, most likely, plus a few imports from Aston or Igben, lined the countertop behind it. At the end of the bar was a door hanging slightly ajar, with a handmade sign nailed to it that read private. "Hello?" he said. "Is anybody here?" Nobody answered. Doyle ran a hand along the bar as he kept looking, stopping for a moment to stare up at the wall behind it. There was a wooden carving hanging there, ragged and uneven like a piece of driftwood. It looked like it was supposed to be something like a cow. The eyes were too large, though, each one a gaping black abscess on the malformed wood of the head. A staircase led up to a second floor that overlooked the first. All the rooms were there, Doyle assumed, and he could just make out the tops of 4 closed doors. Look at the bar. Button. Go out to the village square. Button. Go upstairs. Button.
Okay. So nobody here. Does that mean I can just help myself and get hammered? How about that?
Look at the bar. Button. Look at the bar. The bar, heading level 3. The floor behind the bar was littered with broken glass. Some of those brown bottles must have dropped at some point. The wood was still wet, though, so it couldn't have been long ago. Doyle pictured shattered bits of ceramic in the dirt in the marketplace in Ulan, then let out a heavy sigh. Nestled under the bar in a locked glass case was a bottle of Aston brandy. The last time he had a drink so decadent was about 5 years ago, on the night of his wedding. Nell's father had bought them a single bottle as a gift. It was an Aston wine, actually, but close enough, and they polished off that whole thing before spending their first night together. That was a long time ago, though.
Now we're talking.
Before Nella had left, before Doyle had become an Atwater associate. For a moment, Doyle considered trying to take the brandy, but then looked around again for a bartender, or anybody else who might be watching. It's not right, he thought. Nobody deserves anything they haven't earned. Turn back. Button.
Oh.
Turn back.
You won't let me take the
Go
liquor.
Upstairs. Button.
Boo.
Look at the bar. Button. Go out to the village square. Button. Go upstairs. Button.
Well, let's go upstairs.
Go upstairs. Go the stairs creaked beneath Doyle's feet as he made his way upstairs. A narrow, open hallway wrapped around the second floor, with 3 closed doors ahead of him and one more on the end. Doyle heard nothing from any of them. "Is this place open?" he called out. "I'm looking for Mr. Haddon." There was no response, but Doyle was almost certain he heard a sudden shuffling sound from one of the rooms. Each had a wood-carved number on the door, rough and uneven, like the carving downstairs, labeling them 1 through 4. Nervous, Doyle clenched his fists, just like Mr. Fulton had told him back in Codlin Hill. "Clench each fist to tell yourself you're strong," he had said between bites of boiled lamb. "Every potential customer can sense your anxiety." "Hello?" he said again. "I heard somebody up here. Is everything okay?" "Investigate the rooms." Button. "Go downstairs." Button.
No, we'll investigate. Why not?
Investigate
It's a game.
Button.
We gotta
Investigate the rooms.
of course.
Doyle stepped up to the first room, eyes locked on the wood-carved number. He pressed his ear to the wood, then knocked. Then he moved on to the second door and did the same, then the third. At the fourth door he paused, fists clenching and unclenching, his palms beginning to sweat. An image popped into his mind, the path through the woods on the way to Hemstoke, where he grew up. His father used to take him into the marketplace in Codlin Hill, just half a day's walk down the dirt roads that all the farmers on the outskirts used to help him sell the barley they grew. Afterwards, the old man would get drunk at a tavern not unlike the Golden Calf, and once his eyes began to droop and his mood began to sour, he'd send Doyle back home by himself with the cart. Sometimes, Doyle would see shadows on the old dirt roads, just flickers in the dark ahead of him, and he felt a kind of certainty that he couldn't explain. It was a certainty that told him that there was something out there, and it wasn't just some roaming monster, some horrifying facet of nature. It was there for him, specifically for him of all people, and it was waiting, and he deserved to be found. Some nights, as he rolled that cart back to Hemstoke, he hoped it would find him. That was years ago, though, and Doyle wasn't a child anymore. He clenched one final time, then knocked on the door. Continue. Button. Continue. "Hello? Hello?
Okay.
Hello?" Doyle said. "I heard someone inside. Is Mr. Haddon up here?" Nobody answered, but again Doyle heard a shuffling sound and a muffled groan from inside. He glanced back over the balcony, Blondie's black mane just visible through one of the front windows. His heart was pounding, palms sweating. Again he knocked. "Do you know where the owner is?" He kept knocking. "There's nobody in the square, and I'm getting a little worried here, okay? Please, answer me." A few more seconds passed without response, then Doyle turned back toward the stairs. He slid a hand along the railing as he tried to calculate how many buildings there might be in Cardwike, how long it might take to just check every side street until he found some sign that mentioned Atwater Ceramics, but before he reached the stairs, he heard a sound from behind the door. Just leave, a man said. His voice was shaky, strained. Get out of here. Respond to him, button.
Okay. So maybe we'll find out what happened. Maybe the village got ransacked. Maybe there's a plague. That would be my first couple of guesses.
Respond to him, button. Respond to him. I don't. Who's there? Who's there? Doyle asked. Is that Mr. Haddon? Please, let me in. You need to leave. It was him. Despite the wavering of the man's voice, Doyle was certain. They'd run into each other at a tavern in Ulan a few weeks prior, their first time crossing paths again in over a year. Haddon told him stories about his time traveling through Eddon, and Doyle tried to put on a good face, but after a few flagons of cheap ale's port ale, he couldn't help himself. None of this is working, he said through tears. Then he took Haddon outside to see the cart, still full of unsold ceramics. I keep trying, but nothing is working. The nearest Atwater distribution center was in Cardwike, Haddon told him, and even though he wasn't sure what they'd say, he agreed to act as a liaison. Mr. Haddon, Doyle said again. Talk to me. Are you okay? I'm in bad shape, kid. I mean it, you need to get out of here. Let me help. Can you open the door? I don't know, Haddon said. He seemed to cough the words out, choking through each syllable. Then there was a long pause, and after a bit of shuffling, Doyle heard a thump and an agonized groan. I can't. They'll come back, kid. Just go. Doyle reached for the handle, but it was locked. I'll find a way in, okay? Break down the door. Grit 11 required, button. Go downstairs, button.
So I don't have 11 grit. I think I only have 10,
Character,
right?
button.
Let me look.
Character. Grit. 10.
Yeah. So I don't have
Story,
that.
button.
I can't do that right now.
Let me help. Page 2 of 2. Break down the door. Grit 11 required, button.
Yeah, I don't have that.
Go downstairs, button.
Guess we're going downstairs.
Go downstairs. Go to the private room, button.
Oh, what?
The tavern was still silent. Mud cake brushes shifted beneath Doyle's feet as he walked past the tables, the wood floor creaking with every step. He felt a pang of thirst as he glanced at a half-empty mug sitting untouched on a table. Then he glanced at the bar, a row of brown glass bottles lining the countertop behind it. At one end was a door hanging slightly ajar, a handmade sign nailed to it that read private. At the other was a staircase.
Yeah, why didn't it let us...
second floor overlooking the first. Look at the bar, button. Go out to the village.
See, that's really weird because I don't remember when we were in this bar before. I don't remember giving the option to go to the private room. Like, to me, you should always have those sort of options. Like, I could have gone to the partially open door. I could have gone upstairs. But now that the plot wants me to do it, now it gives me the option.
Go to the private room, button.
To the private room.
Afraid, Doyle peeked through the half-open door, one hand on the jamb as he looked inside. Sorry to intrude, he said. Is anyone here? I need some help, please. He pushed the door open the rest of the way, but there was nobody there. Inside was a room that seemed to double as a bedroom and storage room. One side held a small, feather-stuffed mattress and a bookcase lined intermittently with leather-bound texts and cleaning supplies, while the other side was dominated by stacks of barrels and wooden crates, glass bottles sitting precariously on top. On the wall by the bed was a corkboard with various scraps of parchment pinned to it. Most looked like lists and reminders scrawled in sloppy black ink, and below it was an iron-braced trunk, large and seemingly unlocked. On a wooden stand nearby was a tall, oval-shaped mirror, the glass dusty and speckled with dirt. A frayed red throw rug next to the bed seemed to delineate the two halves of the room, one for life, and one for toil. Doyle wondered if it actually worked for whoever lived there. It had been so long since he'd been away from Blondie and the cart that he found it hard to believe that somebody could actually separate things that way. Look at the corkboard, button. Open the trunk, button. Look in the mirror, button. Look at the barrels and crates, button.
I think we need to look in that trunk first.
Open the trunk, button. Open the trunk. Buried, Doyle squatted in front of the trunk and pulled the latch. It was made of heavy iron with room for a padlock, but was hanging open and loose, so he shook his head and opened it. The lid was heavier than he expected, and it banged against the wall as he lifted it. Inside he found a pile of loose tools and supplies, most rusted or broken, many that looked too old to be useful. He rifled through them, an old wood scraper, and a balled-up pile of black-stained rags, and a cracked piece of wood that looked like it may have been a chair leg, before he found a coiled stretch of rope buried underneath. I'm not stealing this, he shouted to nobody in particular as he pulled a rope from the trunk and pocketed it. I might need this, it's an emergency. Turn back, button.
Okay, well, clearly we need to combine the rope with the hook and go back to the well. Maybe the people who ransacked the village locked the guy in the room and to die, and then threw the key in the well, maybe? In that bucket? I don't know.
Turn back, button.
So,
turn back.
Yep.
Continue, item acquired. Coiled rope.
Coiled rope, okay.
Continue, button. Continue.
So, before we do anything else, let me go in my inventory.
Inventory.
And, let me see.
Weapon. none. Armor, none. Tool, none. Accessor, none. Button. Items 2, button. Equip, button. Consume, button. Iron hook NEW, button. Coiled rope NEW, button. Iron hook NEW, button.
So let's...
Iron hook. An iron hook about 10 inches in length with enough room in the eye for a rope to pass through and be tied. It was dull at the end, rather than pointed, but still Doyle imagined it out on a fishing boat, hooking the pallid lip of some massive undersea beast. An iron hook about 10 inches in length with enough room in the eye for a rope to pass. An iron hook about 10
Okay,
inches.
how do
Iron
I
hook. Heading level
close
3.
you?
Coiled rope NEW. Iron hook. Button.
Um...
Iron hook. Coiled rope NEW. Coiled rope. A neatly coiled 50-foot length of rope found in a truck.
So again, we've got these pop-up overlays, and there doesn't seem to be a close button, but I bet if I turn VoiceOver off...
VoiceOver off.
Yeah, see, then I can make it disappear. So there's some weird flicking and explore by touch things. I mean, it's totally playable.
VoiceOver on.
But that's one minor thing that I would fix, is add an actual OK or close button to those boxes for VoiceOver users, because you're tapping. Actually, let me try something
Iron
here.
Hook button.
Let me tap
Iron
this
hook.
again.
Coiled rope.
And
button.
If I explore by touch.
Coiled rope button. Coiled rope.
Yeah, see, it won't let me. A lot of times, if you get a pop-up in some apps, you can, it'll say double tap to close window or hide controls or something. I'm trying to think of an app that does that, but I've seen that happen a few places. So yeah, I can't close it. So let's figure out...
VoiceOver off.
Let's finish investigating this room.
VoiceOver
and then
on.
we'll try to go to the
Story.
well and figure out how the inventory or how to use things work.
Story button. Story.
Okay, so let's
button,
go back to story.
Look at the corkboard. Button. Look in the mirror. Look at the barrels and crate. Look at the corkboard.
Let's look at the
Look at the
corkboard.
corkboard. The corkboard looked ancient, covered from top to bottom in pinholes and barren spots where all the cork had crumbled away. Clusters of loose pins poked from it here and there, and around them were various bits of parchment with black inked notes scrawled across them, most crumpled and stained as if they had started their lives on the wet surface of a bar. Doyle scanned the parchments for anything relevant, but most seemed mundane: a list of food items probably meant for a market, and a series of names with a sum of gold coins next to each, and the start of a poem addressed to somebody named Hallie, which seemed to peter out into a scribble after a few lines, as if the author had grown too disgusted with their own writing to continue. One note stood out. It was just a few words in black ink, pinned near the center: July 28th, Atwater Representative, open early. That was about a week and a half ago. Doyle didn't know what to make of it. Turn back button.
Okay.
Turn back. Go look at the barrels and crates. Look in the mirror button.
I guess we'll look at the mirror, sure. Oh
the
wow,
face was
a lot
less.
of
Doyle
text
glanced at the mirror, his own face looking back in the speckled glass. There was the dirty beige tunic he'd been wearing for days, and the brass buckled leather belt that tied it at the waist, empty pouches and a coin purse hanging from it. There were his olive green breeches tucked into black leather boots, both coated a grayish brown from dried mud, and the black linen cloak. It had been his mother's once, long ago, tied around his neck. He'd hoped to be more presentable for his meeting with Haddon, but after days on the road, any salesman would understand. The face was less excusable. It had been a long time since he'd seen himself in a mirror, and he felt like he barely recognized the man looking back at him. He had dirty blonde hair cut short that should have been neatly combed, but instead looked disheveled from travel, his hairline receding faster than seemed appropriate for his 31 years. His lips were thin and his chin narrow, which gave his whole expression a slightly drooping character, and while there was no way to know for sure, he was certain that people noticed that before anything else when they looked at him. Most of all, his mustache bothered him. Mr. Fulton told him to grow one years ago. You'll look more respectable, he'd said, more professional, and once Doyle tried it, he'd agreed. Since then, he always tried to keep a neat chevron on his upper lip, carefully trimmed and maintained. He'd lost track since Ulan, though, and it had begun to creep over the edge of his lip, while the rest of his usually clean-shaven face had sprouted 3 days of patchy stubble. He ran 2 fingers over his mustache, his head shaking. Turn back button.
Okay. So that's a nice way to actually get some background on your character, a little visual description, kind of paint a mental picture of what your character is like.
Turn back button. Turn back.
And then let's investigate our final thing here, our
look at the
barrels
and
and
crates. On top, Doyle knelt down in front of one of the nearest barrels and looked it up and down for some kind of label. His first job had been selling barrels of ale just like that one for Fulton and Sons Brewery back in Codlin Hill, and every one of their barrels had a logo stamped in black ink on the front. People don't need to remember the taste, Mr. Fulton used to say, but they need to remember the name. There didn't seem to be any markings Doyle could find, though. 4 other barrels were lined up next to it. They looked the same, unmarked, probably made somewhere in Cardwike, and a few mismatched crates were stacked next to them, one uncovered just enough that Doyle could see clean linens and straw-stuffed pillows inside. On top were a collection of glass bottles, each with a paper label. Doyle only recognized a few of the bigger names, Dunmore Vineyards, and Light Manor, and Upton Brothers, but despite selling ale, he had never learned much about liquor or wine. One bottle caught his attention, pocket-sized and made from blue-tinted glass with a cork stopper. He opened it to smell the contents. Rose, he said to himself. The liquid inside was thick and oily, like some kind of salve, rather than a drink. Perhaps it was a medicine, he thought. It didn't seem likely that it would do any good for a major wound, but for something less severe, it struck him as useful. Again he looked around the room, almost expecting to see somebody watching him. I'm going to take this, okay? I'm sorry. Then he pocketed the small, glass bottle, turn back, button.
Alright, so we got a health potion, basically.
Continue, item acquired. Rose South. Continue, button, continue. Go back to the main room,
Alright,
button.
so we have looted properly in video game fashion here.
Go back to the main room,
Let's
button.
go back.
Go back to the main room. Go to the
See if
private
anything
room.
else
The tavern was still silent. Then he glanced at the bar, a row of brown glass bottles, private. At the other was a staircase, which led up to a second page.
Alright, so let's go back outside.
Bar, go out to the village square, button. Go out to the village square. Look up a cloud of dust blew across the dirt road in the village square. Ahead was the Golden Calf, the two-story inn that dominated the square. In the center of the square was a stone well, and all around the perimeter were wattle and dog houses, the empty dark hand on
the same.
While another read, Pick and Tack General Store. But even the stores were silent and dark. On the opposite end of the square, the check on Blondie, button. Look up the main road, button. Go to the Golden Calf, button. Go to the well, button.
Go to the well.
Go back to the village square, button.
Okay.
Use the rope and hook, button.
Exactly.
Use the rope and hook.
There we go.
Gradually, the village square was silent as Doyle sat down on the edge of the cobblestone well and pulled the coil of rope and the iron hook from his bag. Blondie watched him from next to the Golden Calf as he unraveled the rope. She must have thought it was some kind of treat he was preparing, and threaded it through the eye of the hook. This'll work, he mumbled to himself. Good. After he tied off the rope, he draped the whole thing over the wooden overhang above the well like an oversized fishing line. Then he glanced back at Blondie as if she would be proud of him. Her blank expression offered nothing, before leaning over the edge of the well and staring down into the dark. With his breath held, he began to lower it. Gradually it approached, swaying and clanging against stone, until it was hovering just above the bucket below. A wire handle was fastened to each side of the bucket in a semicircular shape, and after a few tries, Doyle managed to swing the hook under it. Slow and cautious, he raised the bucket up until it was close enough to grab. Inside was an iron pry bar, half submerged in a shallow layer of water that sloshed as Doyle tossed the bucket onto the cobblestone. The workman must have dropped it. Again he glanced at Blondie as he pocketed the tool, a prideful nod in her direction. She didn't respond. Turn back, button.
Okay, so now I shouldn't need as much of a skill check. I can use the pry bar on that door. I think what we'll do is we will get a little bit of background, hopefully, from the guy in the upstairs area. And then we will wrap up the video because you guys are going to have to find out for yourself where this story goes and how you are going to shape it.
Turn back,
so
button.
Let's go back.
Turn back. Continue, button.
Ooh, I got a few things here.
Item acquired. Pry bar. Item lost. Coiled rope. Item lost. Iron hook.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it dumps the items you don't need anymore.
Continue, button.
Perfect.
Continue. Go to the well, but check on Blondie, but look up the main road. Go to the Golden Calf, button.
Let's go into the Golden Calf again.
Go to Haddon's room, but go to Haddon's room. Button.
Yep,
go
exactly.
To Haddon's room. Break down the door. 11 required, button. Go downstairs, button. Break down. I'm not leaving you in there. Doyle checked the door handle again. Thinking in a moment of naive optimism that Haddon may somehow have managed to unlock it. Unfortunately, he hadn't. You okay in there? Doyle asked. I told you to leave, Haddon said, his voice strained. Then came another small groan, and a cough. They'll find you here. Just go, kid. Come on. I'm not leaving you in there. I'll find a way, okay? Break down the door. 11 required, button.
So...
Go downstairs, button. Break down the door. 11 required.
I can try.
Break down the door. 11 required. Go downstairs. Break down the door. 11 required. I'm not leaving you in there. Break down the door. 11. Go downstairs. Go downstairs. Button. Go to the private room.
Okay, so it kind of just went blank.
Go to Haddon's room. Button. Go to Haddon's room. Break down the door. 11 required. Go downstairs. Button.
Okay, so apparently I thought it would maybe let me, like, pry the door open. Because when I had the required item for the well, I didn't have to go into my inventory. It just knew that, oh, you have the required item. Go ahead and use the rope and hook. So apparently the crowbar is used for something else. We haven't gone down the road further yet, so maybe I've acquired something that I will be able to use to break open another area. Let's go downstairs.
Go downstairs. Look at the bar. Button. Go out to the village square. Go to Haddon's room. Button. Go to the private room. Button. Go out to the village square. Button.
We've done pretty much everything in
Go
here.
out to the village square. Check on Blondie. Button.
Let's go check on our...
Blondie. Mister, something about Blondie's disposition seemed off to Doyle. She looked nervous, swaying back and forth and clumping as if she might bolt at any moment. Even as Doyle placed a hand on her head and stroked her well-brushed mane, she seemed to look past him, behind him, as if searching for something. Calm down now, Doyle said. Come on, girl, you're okay. He patted her back, then lifted the wool blanket that covered the back of his cart to look over the remainder of his stock, 12 Atwater Classics vases in the ornamental design, 17 limited edition overglazed bowls, and 19 cooking grass dome-style serving bowls. There had been 20 of each type in the initial set, the Elite Journeyman package, Mr. Haddon had called it, but Doyle had barely made a dent in the past 3 months. He was nowhere close to being able to pay off the initial investment, nor even cover the cost of the pieces he had broken. Again he felt the coin purse on his belt, as if he might suddenly find something new there that he hadn't noticed before, but it was empty. Sighing, he glanced back toward the dirt road that had led him into town. It was a long way back to Helmstog. Comfort Blondie charm 90%, button, turn back, button. Comfort Blondie charm 90%, button.
Okay, let's do it.
Comfort Blondie charm 90%, continue, button, base exp. 3, illustration, risk bonus, 1, gain, total earned. 4. Continue, button, continue. Turn back, button. With one hand still stroking Blondie's mane, Doyle reached into her saddlebag, feeling around for anything that might put her at ease. Usually, he kept treats for her, carrots were her favorite, so he stocked up whenever he could find them, but they had been on the road a while, and it had been a long time since he'd had any coin to spare. Finally, Doyle felt something at the bottom of the bag, along with the grit that had collected there, the broken off tip of a carrot. He pulled it out with a grin. Here you go, he said as Blondie jumped it from his hand, her lips flapping. What did I tell you? Everything's fine. Turn back, button. Turn back, button. Turn back. Go to the well.
Okay,
button.
well.
Look up the main road, button.
We are not going to look up the main road. We are going to wrap up this video because, again, it's this should be a good idea of what the game is like for you. It is very straightforward. You kind of get the idea if this is a type of story that you might enjoy. So, yeah, seems very straightforward. This is another game that I will continue to play. And like I said, this is available for iOS right now. It seems very VoiceOver accessible. The only things that I would really suggest is to do something about those dialog boxes that pop up that that don't have OK buttons, and then maybe even kind of hide when a dialogue appears, make it so that that thing is the only thing that's interactable. Because that way, if you're, especially if you're just flicking, you may or may not be able to get to that text, or it will take dozens of swipes to get there. So once the dialogue appears, if you can make it so that that's the only thing that's there, give it an OK or a close button, and then boom, that would fix pretty much any accessibility issue that I've had so far. Otherwise, it seems very clean, very straightforward. The story is, it's a little slow to start with, but again, you're setting the mood. You're exploring this pretty desolate town. You're down on your luck, and we'll see where things go from there. Anywho, that is where we will wrap it up.
Double tap
and
the Salt Keep.
Hope you guys enjoyed the video. That is the Salt Keep, available now. Go check it out. Support the developer. And if you go ahead and like the video, give it a like if you did. Hope you guys enjoyed it. You can follow me on Twitter at BGFH79, twitch.tv/illegally-cited, illegally-cited.com, and right here on YouTube. Until next time, chat with everybody again later.